I took the lighthouse job because I believed isolation would be good for me. After everything that had happened back home, the breakup, the job loss, the feeling that I was slowly sinking into a life I didn't choose, the thought of spending 3 months alone on a rocky island seemed almost peaceful. The Northridge Lighthouse was old, built in 1892, tall and narrow with a winding iron staircase that groaned every time you touched it. Supply boats came once every 2 weeks. No tourists, no neighbors, nothing but waves smashing against stone. I thought silence would save me, but silence has its own way of chewing at you. The first day was uneventful. I inspected the generator, tested the beacon rotation, checked the pantry supplies, and familiarized myself with the logbook. Everything looked normal enough, aside from a lingering smell inside the tower, like cold metal that had been left out in the rain. I assumed it was just the sea air. Night fell fast. The sun here didn't set. It dropped like a stone. Soon the beacon was spinning, and the ocean outside was just a dark expanse with white foam flickering in and out of sight. I sat at the desk, drinking stale instant coffee, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. It should have been relaxing. It wasn't. Around 1 a.m., I heard footsteps on the stairs above me. Slow, heavy, like someone descending carefully. That was impossible. I was alone. I grabbed the flashlight and climbed, calling out, "Hello? Anyone up there?" My voice echoed up the tower like it didn't belong to me. When I reached the lantern room, no one was there. The lens spun calmly, sweeping light across the sea in rhythmic intervals. I checked behind storage crates. Under the maintenance table, nothing. The place was empty, but when I started going back down, the smell hit me again. Not sea air. Something colder, sharper, metallic, in a way that made my teeth hurt. I didn't sleep that night. The second day I tried shrugging it off. Old buildings always make noises. Metal expands. Wood settles. And maybe the footsteps were just the ocean messing with my head. I'd been stressed for months before coming here. Maybe my mind wasn't used to quiet yet. But the quiet didn't last long. That night, around the same time as before, I heard knocking. Not on the door downstairs, but on the wall beside my bed, inside the keeper's room. 3 slow knocks, then silence. I pressed my ear to the wall. Nothing. I turned off the lamp and tried to sleep again. 3 knocks. Louder this time. And then, faintly, the sound of someone whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but they were right on the other side of the wall, breathing into it like it was paper thin. I sat frozen until sunrise. On day 3, I checked the blueprints of the lighthouse, looking for adjoining rooms, vents, crawl spaces, anything that shared a wall with my quarters. There was nothing. The wall led directly to the outside of the tower. There was no logical explanation. The supply radio crackled around noon. Northridge, status check. Everything normal? I hesitated, staring at the microphone. If I told them I was hearing things, they'd think I wasn't stable enough for the job. I needed the money. Everything's good, I said. Quiet week. That night, the knocking didn't come. Instead, around 2:14 a.m., I woke to the sound of someone breathing right next to my bed. Slow, wet breaths. Like lungs full of seawater. I didn't turn on the lamp immediately. Some instinct told me not to. So I lay there silently, heart hammering, waiting. The breathing grew closer. Then I felt it warm air brushing my ear. That broke me. I lunged for the lamp, flicking it on. The room was empty, but the window, which I had locked, was open. The curtains swayed in the icy wind. I checked outside with the flashlight. Just waves, just darkness. I didn't sleep after that. On day 4, I found something strange inside the logbook left by the previous keeper. His handwriting was neat and precise, except for the last two entries. One read, "The light is not for them, it's for him." And the final entry simply said, "Do not go up after midnight." That was it. No context, no signature, just a warning. I told myself not to believe it. But that night, when the footsteps returned, they weren't coming down the stairs this time. They were pacing back and forth in the lantern room above. I sat at the desk for hours, listening. The metal stairs trembled slightly with each step. Whoever or whatever was walking had weight. Around 3 a.m., the footsteps stopped. Then they ran full speed down the staircase toward me. I jumped from my chair and bolted into my room, slamming the door. The running stopped right outside. The handle twitched twice. Then the knocking started. Not slow this time. Violent, frenzied. I shoved my weight against the door until it stopped. When the sun rose, I found long scratches on the outside of the door. Deep ones. Like something had dragged nails, long nails down the wood. At this point, I considered calling for extraction, but I didn't. Because that morning, something else happened. I found footprints leading from the base of the stairs to the center of the room. They were wet. Salt water pooled in each step. But they weren't shaped like human feet. They were longer, thinner, like someone had walked barefoot after being underwater for far too long. I cleaned them up, trying not to think. Day 5, the weather turned violent. Waves slammed the rocks so hard, the entire tower shook. I had to manually adjust the beacon rotation twice because the wind kept jamming the gears. Around 11 p.m., while I was halfway up the stairs doing repairs, the beacon light flickered and died. The entire tower went black. I froze. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Then, from the darkness above me, something spoke. A voice. Not a whisper, clear, close, and horribly wrong. "Come up." I didn't move. "Come up." Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't go down either. The staircase was too narrow. I felt something cold wrap around the banister just inches from my hand. Not a hand, something with joints that clicked when it moved. I slammed my fist into the emergency breaker. The backup bulb flickered on. For a fraction of a second, I saw something at the top of the stairs, leaning forward, watching me. Grayish skin, wet hair hanging like seaweed, and eyes that reflected the light like an animal's. Then the bulb flared, and it was gone. I stumbled back to my quarters and locked the door. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the key. Around 4 a.m., I heard soft singing drifting down from the lantern room. A slow, humming melody, like someone rocking a baby to sleep. I covered my ears until sunrise. On day 6, I tried to rationalize again. Isolation, stress, lack of sleep. Maybe I was hallucinating. But then I found something outside near the base of the lighthouse, a trail of wet footprints leading toward the cliffs, ending abruptly like the person had stepped off the edge and into the sea. And stuck to the wall near the door was a piece of torn fabric, red, worn, like part of an old uniform. There hadn't been a keeper here in months before me. That night, I barricaded my door with the desk. I sat awake with the lamp on, clutching a wrench, listening for the breathing or the footsteps or the knocking. But instead of noise, I got silence. Heavy, expectant silence. And then right at midnight, the beacon turned off by itself. I hadn't touched the controls. The switch flipped. The generator stopped. Everything became still. And in the darkness of my room, something whispered from just inches behind me. "Look at me." I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Every hair on my body stood on end, and my skin felt tight, like the air around me had turned thick and electric. The whisper came again, this time lower, almost pleading. "Look at me." My heartbeat thudded so loudly, I thought whatever stood behind me could hear it, taste it. I gripped the wrench tighter and kept my eyes locked on the lamp in front of me. It was the only source of light in the room, a small cone of yellow warmth in a sea of darkness. But then slowly, impossibly, the lamp began to dim. Not flicker, dim, as if something were covering it with a shadow, inch by inch, until only a faint glow remained. I felt cold fingers brush the back of my neck. That finally snapped something inside me. I lunged forward, knocking the lamp over, grabbed the emergency flashlight from the drawer, and spun around with it raised. Nothing. Just my room, lit by a trembling beam of white light. The window was still shut, the door still blocked, and yet the smell, salt water, and metal was so strong it stung my throat. I stayed awake until dawn. On day 7, I made my decision. I was leaving. Supply boat or no supply boat, weather safe or not, I wasn't spending another night here. I packed what little I had and went outside to check the small emergency dinghy stored behind the tower. The ocean was calmer than before, but the sky felt wrong, like a storm that wasn't coming but waiting. The dinghy was intact, rope coiled neatly around the base. But on the bottom of the hull, someone had carved words into the wood. 6 long letters, uneven and deep. Stay. I dropped the rope and backed away. That's when I heard the singing again. Soft, sweet, echoing from the top of the lighthouse. It drifted down the walls like the tower itself was humming. I didn't want to look, but I did. At the very top, in the lantern room, a silhouette stood pressed against the glass. Tall, thin, head tilted, watching me. I ran back inside and slammed the door. Every instinct told me not to go upstairs, but I had to get to the radio. It was the only way to contact the Coast Guard. The radio was on the 2nd floor, just below the keeper's quarters. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my breath shaking out of sync with my steps. When I reached the radio room, the door was open. I never left it open. The radio crackled softly. Someone was already speaking. A voice. My voice. Everything's fine here. Just a quiet week. The same words I had said days ago. The radio was replaying them. But no machine could do that. Not without a recording. And I hadn't recorded anything. Then the voice changed. Same tone, same cadence, same breath. But the words became wrong. You should not leave, it said. He needs you to stay. My stomach lurched. My reflection in the room's small window stared back at me, pale and hollow-eyed, as the voice continued speaking in my tone. If you leave, he will follow. If you stay, he will rest. I shut the radio off, but the voice kept speaking. The speaker hissed with static, building, swelling, until a sharp crack filled the room and the device went silent. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. That was when I heard the footsteps again. Slow, coming down from the lantern room. I had 2 options. Go down the stairs toward the exit, or go up and face whatever was descending toward me. Neither felt survivable. I bolted down. The footsteps quickened above, matching my pace. I could hear the metal groaning as it carried weight, heavy, wet weight. I reached the ground floor and threw myself at the exit door. It didn't budge. It was locked. I hadn't locked it. I twisted the metal handle again and again until my fingers hurt. It wouldn't move. The footsteps were close now, very close, coming down the last flight. I grabbed the fire axe from the emergency box and backed into the center of the room. My breathing echoed in the curved walls of the tower. Then silence, not the calm kind. The kind that feels like someone holding their breath right beside you. I raised the axe. A single wet footprint appeared on the step above me. Then another. Then another. Something invisible, or too dark to see, was walking down. My flashlight flickered. The beam stuttered across the stairs until it caught something, an arm, pale and thin, gripping the railing. Water dripped from the fingertips. The rest of the body leaned forward slowly into view. A face appeared behind the rail, gray, bloated, hair hanging in strings, eyes reflecting light like mirrors. A drowned man, but not just drowned, preserved, as if held underwater for decades without decay. His lips parted. Water spilled out and pattered onto the stairs. "Keeper," he croaked. That single word broke me. I turned and swung the axe at the door with everything I had. Wood splintered. I swung again and again. The drowned man descended, each step louder, matching my frantic strikes. On the fourth swing, the door cracked open. I squeezed through the gap and tumbled outside onto the rocks. The sky had darkened. Waves crashed violently against the cliffs, despite the wind being still. The air tasted metallic. I ran toward the dinghy, stumbling over stones, slipping on wet moss. Behind me, the lighthouse door creaked open. I didn't look back. I shoved the dinghy into the water and jumped in, rowing with trembling arms. The oars sliced through the black waves. I didn't stop rowing even when I heard the singing again, closer now. Too close. I made the mistake of looking back once, just once. The drowned man stood at the edge of the rocks, watching, not chasing, watching. His head tilted slightly, as if memorizing me. Then slowly, he stepped backward and disappeared into the lighthouse. I rowed until my arms burned, until the island was only a dark spike on the horizon. Hours later, a fishing vessel spotted me drifting, half conscious. They pulled me aboard and asked what happened. I told them the truth. They laughed at first. Then they saw my hands, deep bruises around the wrists, like someone had gripped them hard with cold fingers. The Coast Guard recovered my belongings, but never found anything unusual. The lighthouse beacon was still functioning. The doors were unlocked. No footprints, no scratches, nothing. The official report said I suffered stress-induced hallucinations brought on by isolation. But I know what I saw, what I heard, what touched me. It has been 4 months since I left Northridge Lighthouse. I've moved inland, far from the sea, but every night I still hear the waves. Every night I wake up at exactly 2:14 a.m., the time I heard him breathing beside my bed. And sometimes, when the room is dark enough, I swear I can smell salt water. I think he followed me after all. The first time I heard the signal from Greystone Point, I was sitting alone in the communications lab, the night shift humming around me with its usual dead silence. I monitored dozens of channels, most of them unused since the early 2000s, and usually the only excitement came from fishing boats accidentally broadcasting their drunken arguments. But at 2:17 a.m., a time I would later learn to fear, an emergency frequency crackled to life. It wasn't static. It wasn't interference. It was a voice. A man's voice, gasping like he was drowning. "Please, don't let the tide take me again." The message repeated every 13 seconds, broken, distorted, and soaked with the unmistakable sound of water sloshing around the microphone. I reported it immediately, and an hour later, I received my orders. Fly to Greystone Point Lighthouse and investigate the source of the transmission. The lighthouse had been abandoned for 12 years after a storm destroyed the living quarters and swept the keeper out to sea. His body was never found. I wasn't superstitious, and I didn't believe in ghosts. I believed in broken equipment and outdated maps. But as the helicopter approached the island the next afternoon, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for me. The pilot, an older man with a cigarette tucked behind his ear, shouted over the rotor wash, "Word of advice, kid. If you hear anybody talking to you from inside that tower, "Don't answer." "Not directly." I frowned. "Why?" He didn't look at me. "Because the last man who did isn't around to explain." Before I could ask more, he dropped me off and lifted away immediately, as if staying even a second longer was dangerous. The moment his helicopter vanished into the fog, the world became painfully quiet. Greystone Point was a jagged knife of land jutting out of the ocean. The lighthouse stood at the far end, tall and bony, its white paint peeled away by years of storms. The wind tasted like rust and rain. I walked inside. The air was colder than it should have been. The interior smelled like soaked metal, like something left underwater far too long. The staircase spiraled upward in a narrow twist of iron bones, groaning every time I touched it. I checked the generator first dead. The electrical panel corroded. The radio system powered on. That was impossible. The equipment had no functioning power source, yet the indicator light glowed a faint, unnatural blue. I leaned close. The speaker hissed. Then the voice returned. Not a recording. Live. "Hello? Who's there? Please help me." My stomach tightened. "This is Technician Mark Holloway. Identify yourself." For a moment, only water gurgled through the speaker. Then the man whispered, "You came back." The signal died. I stared at the radio, shivers crawling up my spine. When I turned away, I noticed something dragged across the dust-covered floor, long streaks, like someone had been pulled. The streaks led toward the staircase. I followed them halfway up before something metallic clanged above me. 3 slow knocks. The same pattern from the emergency broadcast. 3, 3, 5. I froze. The knocks repeated, matching the rhythm of my heartbeat, as if mocking it. "Hello?" I called upward. My voice didn't echo. It felt swallowed. Silence. Then something dripped onto my shoulder. I wiped it with my fingers. Not rainwater. Thick, oily, cold. I aimed my flashlight upward, and the beam caught a wet footprint on the stair above me. Then another, and another. They were shaped wrong, too long, too narrow. Toes pointed like they'd been pulled by the tide for years. I backed down until my foot hit the radio room door. I went inside and shut it. I forced myself to breathe normally. I was a technician, not a child. Fear was irrational, except when the lights flickered and the radio turned itself on. The voice returned, but now it was calm, emotionless. "I see you." I stepped away slowly. "Where are you broadcasting from?" A long breath filled the speaker, bubbling with liquid. "Behind you." I spun around. Nothing. But the window behind me was fogged from the inside, and drawn into the condensation was a single word: "Stay." I rubbed the glass clean with trembling fingers and backed toward the door. The sun was slipping behind clouds now, and I knew the storm would trap me here for at least 2 nights. I grabbed my flashlight, tools, and emergency rations and went to check the upper levels. The air grew colder as I climbed. Halfway up, the smell hit me hard, salt water mixed with something metallic and rotten. The old keeper's quarters were on the 4th landing. The door was opened by a crack. Something dark stained the floorboards inside. I nudged the door with my boot. The entire room had been destroyed, bed overturned, desk splintered, walls scarred with deep gouges. And on the wall above the ruined mattress, written in long strokes of blackened water, were the words, "The tide brings him back." A notebook lay open on the floor. The final entry read, "He's knocking again. Don't answer. Don't look. The tide remembers what it lost." I closed the notebook with shaking hands. Then another flash of lightning illuminated the window, and in that brief light, I saw a man standing on the rocks outside, drenched, barefoot, staring directly up at me. I blinked. He vanished. The wind howled, but no wave could have carried him away that fast. I moved to the lantern room, the highest point of the lighthouse. The beacon was dead, the lens cracked, but water pooled around its base like the storm had flooded only this part of the tower. I crouched beside the large machinery and checked wires, fuses, rotation gears. That's when I heard it singing, a low, muffled hum drifting through the tower walls, as though someone were standing outside, circling the lighthouse in the storm, humming to themselves as they walked. I tried to ignore it and kept checking the cables. Something moved behind me. I turned. Nothing. I crouched again, and the singing grew louder right behind the metal door. Then came the knocking. 3, 3, 5. I stepped back slowly. A shadow appeared at the bottom of the lantern room's glass, just the top of a head, swaying, watching. My breath froze in my lungs. The shadow lingered. Then it began climbing the outside wall. No handholds, no rope, just rising, like the tide lifting a corpse. I stumbled backward and slammed the door shut. Something hit the glass from the outside hard enough to shake the floor. A face pressed against the window, gray, swelled, eyes pale and bloated, mouth open as water spilled from it. The drowned keeper, still watching, still trying to speak. Then lightning struck the sea, and he vanished again. I barricaded the door with a maintenance beam and didn't move until my legs stopped shaking. When I finally went back downstairs, the radio was on again, even though I had turned it off. The voice now was clearer, stronger, almost angry. If you leave, he will follow. If you stay, he will rest. The storm raged all night. Near midnight, I heard footsteps on the stairs, slow, dragging, wet. They stopped right outside the radio room door. The handle turned left, right, left. Then the knocking began, soft at first, then violent. I held a wrench in my hand and stared at the door as the wood bowed inward. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the knocking ceased. The lighthouse went completely silent, and a whisper drifted through the room like cold breath across my neck. You should not have answered. I ran down the spiral staircase so fast I almost fell. But no matter how quickly my boots hit those metal steps, the siren never faded. It stayed behind me, above me, inside the walls somehow. When I burst through the lower hatch and out onto the rocks, the fog rolled over me like waves of smoke. My flashlight cut only a few feet into the thickness, but I could already see it, the silhouette of the ship. It was enormous, maybe 200 feet long, with masts broken at angles that shouldn't be possible. Its hull scraped the rocks with a slow groan, like it had been at sea for 100 years. Every instinct I had said, to run back inside, shut the door, and never return. But the light from the beacon kept stuttering strangely, pulsing like a heartbeat, and the siren, it wasn't coming from the ship. It was coming from somewhere deeper in the fog. I walked closer. The ship towered above me, wood swollen and black with rot. A thick rope ladder hung down, swaying slightly, as if someone had just climbed down moments before. I scanned the rocks, waiting for someone to appear, for a survivor to stumble out. But there was only silence. And then, above me, a voice whispered, "You took too long." I spun around. Nobody. The voice was a woman's, soft, breathless, almost inside my ear. A wave crashed behind me, cold spray hitting my back. When I turned again, the rope ladder was gone, ripped upward, as if yanked by unseen hands. And the ship, it drifted backward, without waves, without movement, simply sliding away into the fog until it vanished completely. I stood there in stunned silence. That was when I heard it, a second siren, but not the beacon this time. This one was mechanical, sharp, official, coming from inland, the emergency horn of a Coast Guard cutter. I wiped my face with my sleeve and started heading back, but something felt wrong. The fog wasn't clearing. It was thickening. My flashlight dimmed, flickered, and went out. I froze. The rocks beneath my feet felt suddenly unfamiliar, uneven in a way I didn't remember. And then, rising out of the fog, I saw a shadow, tall, round, tapering toward the top, glowing faintly red. A lighthouse, but not my lighthouse. This one was skeletal, broken in half like it had been struck by lightning. The upper room dangled sideways, its glass shattered, and inside it something moved. A figure pacing slowly around the broken lantern room. I took a step back, but the rocks behind me shifted, almost as if pushing me toward it. I recognized the silhouette instantly, the stagger in the walk, the slight limp, the way he held his arm close to his side. It was Rowan. But Rowan had died 2 years ago in a storm while trying to repair the lantern wiring. They buried an empty coffin because they never found his body. He turned toward me, and even through the fog, even through the broken structure, I could see his face bloated, pale, waterlogged, like he had drowned just hours ago. "You were supposed to replace me," he said. My throat locked. I tried to step back, but the rocks under me shifted again, forcing me forward. "Rowan," I whispered, "what happened to you?" His head twitched violently, like something invisible was jerking him around by the skull. "You're late," he hissed. "You were always late." The broken lighthouse flickered, the red glow pulsing. And then I realized there were 2 beacons in the fog. The soft red glow from Rowan's ruined lighthouse, and the cold white beam from mine. But something was wrong with the white beam. The rotation was off, uneven, as if the machinery had someone standing in front of it, blocking it every time it passed a certain angle. Someone tall, someone watching the shore. Rowan's voice cut in again, louder this time. "You should have answered." He pointed toward my lighthouse. "He called for you." "Who?" I whispered. Rowan didn't answer with words. Instead, he stepped out of the broken lantern room and walked straight into the empty air, falling 30 feet onto the rocks without a sound. His body hit the ground with a wet crack, but when I ran toward him, he was gone. Not a trace, not even blood, only footprints leading toward my lighthouse. My heart dropped. I followed them. They were deep, heavy, as if whatever made them weighed far more than a human body. The closer I got to the lighthouse, the more wrong everything felt. The windows were dark. The beacon flickered irregularly, and someone was standing in the doorway. A man, tall, so tall he had to duck to enter. His face was in shadow, but I could see his eyes dim, circles reflecting the distant light of the ocean. He stepped aside, inviting me in. "You kept the signal on," he said, voice hoarse like someone unused to speaking. "Good." My chest tightened. "Who are you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he lifted something from his coat, a logbook, my logbook, but not the one I had left inside. This one was soaked, swollen, pages warped with salt water. He handed it to me. I flipped open the first page. My name was written at the top, but the date? The date was 2 years old, the day Rowan died. The stranger leaned close to my ear. "You were supposed to take the shift that night." My hands went numb. The pages flipped by themselves, slapping wetly until they stopped on the final entry. I read it, and everything inside me collapsed. The final line said, "Body recovered. Cause of death, drowning." Identity confirmed, Rowan Ellis. But below that line, handwritten in a different ink, was another note, one that had been added later, maybe recently. Second body recovered, unidentified, wearing Lighthouse uniform, face unrecognizable, believed to be the replacement keeper. My vision blurred, my knees buckled. I heard the man whisper behind me, "You were never late. You never arrived." The truth hit me like a wave. I wasn't supposed to replace Rowan. I already had. The night Rowan died, I died too. The reason no one answered my radio calls, the reason no ship responded, the reason the fog never lifted, was because this lighthouse wasn't part of the world I thought it was. It was a place for the dead to finish what they failed to do in life. The man stepped into the full beam of the lighthouse light, and for the first time, I saw his face. It was mine, waterlogged, bloated, eyes pale and lifeless. He smiled. "Our shift is over." And then everything went black.